Well, first of all, about the unity, I have to say, and we are writing about it in the book, that there were many different Soviet Jewry organizations which were competing with one another, which were fighting against one another, which were accusing one another in betrayal. And sometimes I, as a spokesman, an official spokesman of our movement, had to send the same lead document signed by, let's say, 100 refuseniks to Senator Jackson or to the leaders of Jewish communities. I had to send them twice, meaning that American tourists had to smuggle the same document twice and take the risk twice to two different organizations which were on the same street in Manhattan because they will not talk to one another. So, and nevertheless, it was one big movement because in the end, all these organizations were on the same list of KGB as anti-Soviet organizations. And when I had this long list of my accomplices, hundreds and hundreds of those foreign tourists with whom I met, nobody knew from what organization to what organization they belong. It didn't really matter. To the contrary, with the time you understand that it's a great advantage that we had also in London, we had an organization which was representing establishment, an organization which was representing students, an organization which was representing housewives, and of course we had religious organizations, and of course we had Chabad Shlichim, and we had Bnei Akiva Shlichim. And that was giving opportunity to reach practically every group in the world. And in the end, the fact that there were so many different groups who disagree between one another but have the same aim was only helpful. Now, in the punishing cell, that was exactly the aim. After all, punishing cell is a very small, cold place, and they take away everything warm what you have on you. 3 pieces of bread, 3 cups of water, no absolute darkness, nobody to talk to, and you can become crazy. And after 110 days and stopped keeping you in the punishing cell, I fainted, so they took me to hospital, then brought me back. So first of all, you have to remind yourself all the time why you're there, that in fact, you are this center of this unique struggle. And of course, all the Jews of the world are with you. And you try to think every moment about everybody whom you knew, and to think what he or she is doing now, and everybody with whom you spoke by telephone, and of course about your wife, and to try to keep yourself being part of this imagined reality, which happened to be a very real reality later. Second, you have to use your sense of humor, to laugh on the prison guards. I loved to tell them anti-Soviet jokes because they cannot even laugh on anti-Soviet jokes. They have to express their anger. And you say, well, you think that I'm in prison. You cannot even laugh when you want to laugh. Third, it was a great place for me to sing because always whenever I was singing from kindergarten, everybody was asking me to stop singing immediately. In the kindergarten, then you were saying, you wait, you will sing after this. And this after, which you promised, never came because everybody hated me singing. Here in the punishing cell, in prison, where it is supposed to be silent as in the grave, nobody is permitted to say loudly any word because people don't have to know who is in the next cell. But I have nothing to lose. So with all the strength of my lungs, I am singing, shouting, Kol Halam Kulo, Gesher Tsar Meod, V'Haikar Lo Lefachet Klal. And they're becoming crazy because first of all, they don't know what I'm shouting in Hebrew. Maybe I'm calling for revolt. Second, they probably are not enjoying from my singing as everybody. So it's additional pleasure. And I'm singing and feeling that I'm together with all my people. And my most important hobby from my childhood was chess. And I loved from the age of 5, my mother taught me chess and said, that is the world in which you can have freedom of thought. And really, it was, that is the world in which you can freely dream and take risks and you're not punished for this risk, to the contrary. So I love the world of chess, and that was a world through which I could win people who were taller than me, and everybody was taller than me, so I had to win everybody. And so it was, and then I learned to play simultaneous games, and then to play simultaneously 3 games without looking on the board. So I enjoyed all this, but it was a great hobby. In prison, in punishing cell, you find use for this, because I was playing thousands and thousands of games, and you're winning all of them, because you're not leaving until you will win. And then you turn the board, and so now you're playing the same game, but for the other side, and you are looking for improvements. So not only you're winning every game, but from game to game, you're improving the previous one. So instead of intellectually becoming weaker, you feel that you're becoming stronger. And then the important thing happens, about which we are writing the book, that, well, you're playing white, but in 10, 15 minutes, you'll be playing black, and then again and again and again. At some moment, it doesn't matter white or black. They are all these 32 pieces, they are tools of your survival. And so you see that both sides are equally important for you, because you're surviving for being together with them. And that's how I feel about, after this many years, about Israel and diaspora Jewry. Because I had to be, for many years, to be a representative of Israel government to diaspora Jewry. And then for the same number of years, I had to be a representative of diaspora Jewry towards Israeli government. And whenever we speak about some of the very serious conflicts, when one side feels that the other side is betraying Jewish values, or the other side feels that you are betraying Jewish state, and it is very important to turn the board in your head and to see it for the other side. And again, to understand that after all, we are both parts of our people are interested in how we survive together and continue our march together through history. And that's why it's very important to not to agree. We can never agree. We have different sets of priorities, but to understand the other side and to understand that after all, the aim for both sides is the same.
So in the spirit of the Queen's Gambit, which has become very popular, and chess, and of Natan Sharansky, we offer this metaphor of turning the board around in your head when you're in a fight between Israel and diaspora, between left and right, between religious and non-religious. But 2 important subtleties here. One is, notice that for the 9 years that Natan is in the Gulag, he's the great stubborn person. He's the great uncompromiser. And in the 9 years that he's in Israeli politics and 9 years in the Jewish Agency, he's the great compromiser. What's the difference? You don't compromise with mortal enemies, but with family, with our people, you try to find some kind of middle path. That's the first subtlety. The second subtlety is we're not saying I'm okay, you're okay, we don't stand for anything. Our moderation, I like to call muscular moderation. All we're saying is that there's a value in seeing the perspective of the other, in learning the perspective of the other, agreeing to agree sometimes and agreeing to disagree other times, but to not make every conflict mortal conflict, not make every conflict existential, and to try to find the areas of overlap, not just the areas of dissent and deviation. And that, in a sense, is the message of the book: the power of Jewish peoplehood, the power of dialogue for us all, and the power of trying to find some kind of sense of unity, even when, as human beings, we're going to have very diverse opinions and very different takes on many important things. And with that, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Rabbi Brackman and see if you have any questions or comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. That was fascinating. And thank you for, sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning, but it's a pleasure and honor to have you with us. So we're going to open the floor to questions, beginning with a few questions which I'd like to present, and then we'll ask, please post your questions in the chat and we'll try and answer them. So thank you so much. Having read your book, and I encourage everybody to get it. It's a fantastic book. It's basically a biography of Natan Sharansky, written excellently by Professor Troy, together with Natan Sharansky. So to read about his life, definitely me growing up in the 80s, it was enigma who Natan Sharansky was as a child. Being able to read his entire life story, which I've already made my way through partly, is really important for myself and for students and the world Jewish community and the wider community. So I'd like to ask maybe the first question before we open up. At the beginning of your book, you talk about you growing up in Soviet Russia and your family and your dacha, your holiday home in a place that was called not boring or interesting in Russian. So you talk about your earliest memories of anti-Semitism, going with your father and your father being attacked for wearing medals as if they didn't belong to him. Did they buy it in a bazaar and so on? How did those earliest memories of anti-Semitic Soviet experiences impact you through your life and with your propelling you to escape the Soviet Union, other forms of escape, and fighting for Jewish pride through your life? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Well, no, I had to argue with many of my friends and Jewish leaders who believe that anti-Semitism is a very strong accelerator for Jewish identity, the factor which is strengthening Jewish identity. And I don't think so. I have to say, it is connection with Jewish people and with the Jewish history and with the state of Israel, which turns you into proud Jew. In my childhood, I had nothing Jewish, zero, no tradition, no language, no religion, no place where you can get the book in Hebrew, and no place where you can learn anything. No bar mitzvah and no brit milah. Such words didn't exist in our lives. But one Jewish thing which existed was anti-Semitism. That was in abundance. Anti-Semitism in the streets, anti-Semitism jokes, and permanent conversations at home about discrimination of the government, that what are the institutions which are closed for Jews, what are careers which are you cannot have as a Jew. And the message was very simple from the parents, that because you're a Jew, you must be the best, number one in your class, in physics, in mathematics, in chess, in music, doesn't matter in what. But this success in your profession, that is the only thing which can help you to overcome this disease with which you're born. You were born with this disease. It is written in the idea of your parents, Jew, and that has no positive meaning. It has only negative meaning, but you have to learn how to live with this. No, parents, of course, gave you the feeling that you should not be scared by anti-Semites. You should not be ashamed by the fact that you're Jew. In fact, we Jews have great history, but what kind of history we have? Well, who knows? Well, as I mentioned, there are one or two story about David and Goliath, because there was a stage in our family. But practically nothing positive except of resisting to anti-Semitism. And with this feeling of that you have to survive and in spite of anti-Semitism and to be the best in your profession, with this feeling, you live as a loyal Soviet citizen, as a double thinker who knows that all this is lies, but the truth you can say only in the family. And you're not ready to fight for anything because there are no values in your life except for the value of survival. And then comes 67, and Israel is entering our lives, and we read in the underground about our history, and suddenly you discover that if only you will decide your history will not be beginning from communist revolution, but from exodus from Egypt. And it is so exciting, so interesting. And you discover Jewish people, all those tourists who are coming and saying, oh, your father is from Odessa, my father is from Odessa. we have family, we want to help you. And you discover the state of Israel, which is ready to send airplanes to the end of the world, but to help you. And that's when you really have strength to change your life and to start fighting for your rights as a Jew, for the rights of the other Jews, and then simply for the freedom. So, of course, I had a lot of anti-Semitic experience in my life. It reminded me how it is important, this feeling of the family, because after all, only your family can protect you. But I didn't have any real pride and strength from my Jewishness until I discovered my identity, until I discovered that it's not simply a word in the ID, it's unique history, unique face, and a unique state.
If I could just add, it's so important that we tell this story, that we not just tell Natan's story, but that each of you tell your story. You know, we just finished Purim, and in Jerusalem, we had the longest Purim ever because of Shabbat and Shushan Purim. It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and of course now we're building up to Pesach. And what's the message of Pesach, of Passover? Vahigarat levincha, to tell your children. And part of the reason why we wrote this book is because not enough of us have told our children and our grandchildren the amazing story of the modern Jewish exodus. Not the exodus from thousands of years ago, but the exodus that just occurred barely 3 decades ago. And that we as a community rolled up our sleeves and we said never again at the time, and we said never alone, and we created a miracle. And our kids have to know that story, our grandkids have to know that story, and we have to remind ourselves of that story. Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you very much. So we have a question from, just to point out that you come from Donetsk, and tonight is, we have with us one of the first Chabad rabbis from Donetsk in 1991, and he has a yard site of his father tonight. So it's a great opportunity to pay honor to Jews of Russia and Donetsk, of course. So we also have a question from Mr. Yasiskin, who his cousin in Israel knew him, knew yourself, and helped get Russian Jews out and into Israel. He worked for years on this. His name was Nehemiah Levanon.
Oh yeah.
He was wondering if you remember Nehemiah from Kibbutz Kfar Blum in the Galilee. Who worked with you.
If you read the book, you'll read also about Nehemiah Levanon. It was the great pioneer, the great Zionist, the hero of this underground bringing Aliyah Beit, and then leading the Lishkat Kesher, the Nativ organization, which was responsible for connecting Jews behind the Iron Curtain. At the same time, I had some very serious conflicts with this organization because they, being responsible for sending thousands of tourists from all over the world and organizing this, playing a very important role. At the same time, they believed that Jews should not be involved in any other activity but Zionist activity. And because I became a spokesman of Zionist movement and human rights movement, I had quite serious problems with this organization. So we frankly speak about the greatness of this organization, but also about my disagreements with them, whether we should help to only to the Jews who go to Israel or to all the Jews who want to go out from the Soviet Union, whether I should speak also on behalf of other minorities who are suffering or not. So that's the same type of debates and disagreements which we have today among ourselves. But yes, Nehemiah Levanon has played unique historic role in our struggle, and the fact that we had sometimes disagreements only shows how it is important to see big picture and to remember what unites us and not where we disagree.
Okay, thank you very much. And a further question when you were in the Gulag, and you write about, or people have read about, that you recited poetry to survive. First of all, what poetry was this? And also, if I may add to this question, my memory, and I think what you write about in the book, is that you used to play chess games, and that was your first escape before other escapes, a mathematician and science. And it's interesting that other people have written about or spoken about how they would recite psalms and prayers in the Gulag to keep their mind aware and being able to survive. And you write that chess is a form of Torah study, that you are interactive, and you write in your book how you found chess as a replacement. So maybe you could speak about what kept you alive during and sustained you during the Gulag.
Well, I spoke already about chess. As to psalms, I can tell you that I had a very dramatic story with my psalm book. Few days before my arrest, I didn't know that it would be days of arrest, though everybody expected. It was one of the highest moments of our struggle, and I was simultaneously spokesman for two movements, and some of my colleagues were already arrested. So everybody was expecting that soon it can be my arrest. At this moment, I'm receiving from some foreign tourists bringing me a small psalm book and note from Avital that that is the book which was with her for the last months, and she feels that now is the time to send it to me. And I open it, and I understand that I don't know most of the words, because my Hebrew was mainly prison, treason, refusal, demonstrations, and it was active language of the struggle. And more than this, that if you didn't learn how to read this text, you will not understand where is the beginning and the end of the sentence, because there is no modern syntaxes, no periods and drops. And so I decided, look, it's not the time now. I'm in the middle of the struggle. I put this aside. And then some days after this, I was arrested. And they bring me the list of everything what was confiscated. And there is one of the items is small black book, not in Russian. That was written. And I realized that I remember the note of Avital, and I started fighting that they'll give it to me. It took 3 years before I got it in prison, and they gave it to me together with the telegram that my father passed away. And so I decided that I will read this psalm book until I will understand what is written there. And well, I was a mathematician, so I was using mathematical logic. So I'm taking every word that I know, and I compare it with other places where it is met, and try to build the sentence. And so it happens with hundreds of thousands of letters which are there, and you don't know where is the end or the beginning of the sentence. The first sentence, which I understood fully, Gam ki elech bagei tzalmavet lo irara ki eta imadi. It's certain small, short words, and when you'll go through the valley of death, you'll fear no evil, because I am with you. Who is with me? It can be Melech David, King David. It can be Avital. It can be people of Israel. It can be Kadosh Baruch Hu. In fact, all of them together are coming to my cell to say me, fear no evil, because we are with you. So it could not be coincidence. That's how I felt. And that's how I continued reading, and then I understood more or less practically every psalm. So King David was my partner there. And then I was fighting always whenever they tried to take with me. And that was the only piece of property which I brought to Israel. And that's always with me. So that's my communication with King David. Well, it was not with me in punishing cell, but it was with me in the cell all the time. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And you also write about when you grew up in your home, you had a David and Goliath on your mantelpiece, and that inspired you every day.
Well, yeah, that's true. It's somehow with having no Jewish education, no Jewish culture, and as I said, I had my Brit Milah at the age of 25 and my Bar Mitzvah at the age of 65. But at the same time, we had some small stature, which was brought by my relatives on the shuk, on the market. And probably it was brought as a trophy by some soldiers. They were coming back from Europe. And that some young man is standing on the head of some big head. And my father explains to me that that's David and Goliath and tells me the story. And in fact, that was the oldest story that I had in my mind. That's our Jewish story, how we are small, but how we should not be afraid to fight against big enemies. Yeah, well, to say that gave me a lot of Jewish education, no, but that gave me a feeling of Jewish pride and was somehow preparing me to the future challenges. Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few further questions.
Yeah.
From Rebecca Katzman. How do you view Russian Jews settled in Israel? And what do you think about the larger Jewish world, how the larger in Israel?
And what I think about the larger Jewish world, what? I didn't understand the question. How Russian Jews settled in Israel, and the second, what?
About how Israel, Jews, what lessons?
Okay, okay, I'll answer the first question, which I understood. Look, of course, when 1 million Jews, 20% of population at this moment moved in few years, of course, it's such a huge wave of immigration, and there was a lot of frictions and a lot of challenges, and we write about it in our book, how we activists of Soviet Jewry movement became also the activists of the struggle for absorption, integration, how we created our own party, Israel B'Aliyah, which the aim was to give to this Aliyah, to the tools to integrate into Israeli society. But, and so of course there was a lot of problems at that moment. But if you look back 20 years after this, it's unbelievable success, unbelievable. You will not find any example in the history of any country that such a huge number of new population is joining, and already in the first generation, 20 years later, the average income of these people who came is at least the same as average income of Israeli. And of course, you will not find any hospital and any laboratory and without the leading specialists there also from this area. So it happened because this Alim came with a lot of ambition and with a lot of knowledge. As you heard, it's not only me, everybody learned that you as a Jew to survive in the Soviet Union, you must be the best in your profession. And that's why all these people who were professional elite of the country of 200 million people are now coming to Israel. And on one hand, it's a big problem when the number of doctors is doubled in 1 year. But on the other hand, it's a great potential for the country. But that also happens because Israel is, with all the prejudices and restrictions, Israel is very open to this. And Israel is putting big efforts to make sure that these people will be able to succeed. So it worked from both sides, from both ways. And with all, of course, there are still some problems. We don't have enough social housing for the elders, and of course the problems of the relations between state and religion, but it's problems which are passing. But if you look how 1 million Jews moved from the Soviet Union to Israel, and how naturally they became inseparable part of Israel, that's a great success.
We keep on coming back, both in this conversation and in the book, to the theme of identity, right? What is it to have a Russian identity while still being part of the Jewish people and a part of Israel? What is it to have a particular Jewish identity while you're still in England or in the Netherlands or in Iceland? And one of the things we notice quite remarkable, Natan says that when he meets with birthright students, birthright participants, these many young Jews who voluntarily have relinquished any ties to the Jewish people, and now we're coming to Israel back when travel was a verb for the first time, he says he sees in their eyes the same excitement, the same sense of discovery, the Hebrew word in Israel, taglit, the Hebrew word taglit is revelation, the same revelation that he and his fellow refuseniks experienced. And I know there are many people on this call who are Chabad Shluchim who've seen the same thing, right? Who reach out to Jews and they have that little nitzotz, that little spark, and you reignite it, and boom, in their eyes you can see the excitement, the intensity. And we're trying to strike this middle balance. We don't want to go to a far extreme of ultra-nationalism that negates anybody who isn't exactly like us, but we don't want to go to John Lennon universalism, where there's no heaven, no hell, no boundaries, no borders, and no identity. Is there an easy formula? Of course not. But have Jews been working on the balance for thousands of years and doing a pretty good job of it? Absolutely. Rav.
Okay, thank you. So a further question is relevant to, for many years, we've been on campus at university and in Europe, and anti-Semitism is, of course, on the mind of many. What advice can you give us to reduce anti-Semitism in Europe today?
Well, yeah, anti-Semitism is rising, both hatred to Jews and hatred to Jewish state in very different forms. At some moment it seems that Europe is leading, then American universities became even more center of new hatred to Jewish state. In fact, today we have in England one university after the other passed this resolution of support of international definition of anti-Semitism. In American universities goes much more problematic. We saw unique solidarity of British Jews against Corbyn, the leader of Labour Party, when it was proved that he is anti-Semitic. We don't see such level of solidarity among American Jews when some of the leaders of some progressive movements are showing some prejudices against Jews. But in general, what is very important to remember, that's what I'm saying to students when they travel all over universities, and there was more than in 100 universities in America and in many universities in Europe, that you have nothing to be ashamed of. That's very important, that they will feel that they don't have, that with a lot of new blood libels and with a lot of dirty propaganda, and unfortunately with a lot of attempts to compromise Israel as the one who goes against interests of minorities, against democracy, war crimes, and so on. In fact, our enemies have no arguments. We show in our book how they, in fact, our enemies try, instead of the arguments, to speak only with the slogans. They are afraid to go into the debate. And we Jews are wise people who are used to debate every point. So my message to them, don't be afraid to debate. Don't be afraid to go deep into the issues, which seems like those who compromise you as a believer in Jewish values, believer in Tikkun Olam, and so you'll go deep into things and you'll see that we have all the reasons in the world to be very proud, even if we disagree here or there with this decision of the government or this step. But in general, we have all the reasons to be proud of our unique role as a people and as a state in defending the right of every person to live in accordance with their identity and to live in freedom. And really Israel is absolutely unique place, being part of the free world, which doesn't believe in nationality, and we insist we are part of the free world, but we are Jewish state, and being part of the Middle East, where there are no democracy, and we insist that we are a state in the Middle East, but we are a democratic state. So, important thing is not to be afraid, because there is a lot of doublethink. It's really, we are writing a lot about it in the book, and after the book we wrote with Gil a lot about it, how the doublethink, which was typical for Soviet Union, for the totalitarian regime, where people were afraid to say what they really think, how suddenly we see this phenomena, more and more Jews and young Jews on the campuses are afraid to say what they really think against anti-Semitism and against new anti-Semitism, because it can influence on their career. And that's, in fact, that is our message. You have no reason to be ashamed, and it is very dangerous to be afraid to become a double thinker. You can lose your freedom even in the free state. Gil, you want to add something?
These are two of the most profound moments in writing the book. Natan explained that he saw how dictatorships, specifically the Soviet dictatorship, used anti-Semitism as a tool, not just against Jews, but as a way of, uniting others against the Jews. And he assumed that anti-Semitism was a tool of dictators. He assumed, I'm sorry to say naively, that democracies would never have anti-Semitism. Can you imagine? So when all of a sudden I, as an American, looking through his eyes, see how horrific it must have been to discover that anti-Semitism is so strong, is so insidious, that it even can thrive in Europe. It can even thrive in England. It can even thrive in American campuses. Devastating. Similarly, doublethink. George Orwell talks about it to describe the Soviet Union. His whole emergence after 1967 and his discovery as a Jewish identity, his discovery of freedom, and his becoming a human rights champion was in order to break free of the doublethink. And to see that the capital of doublethink in the United States of America today is one campus after another, to see that in Europe, to see that in the UK, doublethink is spreading, to see that there are polls showing that in the United States of America, 64% of Americans say that at one point or another during the course of a week, they won't express their political opinions. Devastating. And so it's really important that we roll up our sleeves, look at ourselves and say, what is going on within our society? And of course, we should point out that it's not top down, right? In the Soviet Union, it was the dictators imposing doublethink, the dictators imposing anti-Semitism. Here, it's coming from professors, it's coming from peers, it's coming from Twitterdom, which I spell D-U-M-B. It's coming from social media. And it's really important that we have what I call Pilates Judaism and Pilates human rights, internal strength to resist those foes and those forces. And we have to do it individually, and we have to also do it collectively together. And the essence of Natan's message also was, everybody focuses when we're accused, what's wrong with us? What did we do wrong to be accused? And the great US Senator from New York, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, said, I'm not interested in the accused, I'm interested in the accuser. What's wrong with them that they can always find something wrong with us? It's not about us, it's about them.
Okay, thank you. So we'll maybe pose two more questions and then we'll close. So we have a very broad audience tonight, and we welcome the communities from across Europe, including Norway. And we have a question from Norway, where there's recently they passed a resolution completely boycotting Israel by the local Labour Party, which is also a problem that's other places in Europe. How would you suggest explaining local politicians your 3Ds, your well-known 3D theory of anti-Semitism, to make them reconsider this resolution?
Well, look, It's very often I heard that, well, we are not, of course we are against anti-Semitism, but we are critical of the policy of the state of Israel. And I said, no, but almost every citizen is critical of the policy of the state of Israel. Politician who stops critical of the policy of the state of Israel has no future in Israeli politics. So we are very open for criticism. But look, the anti-Semites, how do you see that they are anti-Semites when they are attacking Jews? They are using demonization of Jews through all the history. A Jew was the closest to that devil. It's the expression of Camus, that for anti-Semite Jew is something the most close to devil. So there are all these satanic accusations against Jews, and delegitimization of Jews. Well, Stalin wrote article, Jews are not a nation, and of course, early Christianity, the Jew replacement of the religion and so on. And the double standard, there were special laws applied to Jews which were not applied to anybody else through all history. And now look, if you're criticizing Israel and then you're using demonization, like you're saying, and that's real statements of the European leader, that I was in a refugee camp of Palestinians, that is Auschwitz of today. No, I was many times in the refugee camps. It's a big shame that fifth generation of Palestinians are in the camps. I can argue with everybody why they are there and who has to be blamed for this, but what it has to do with Auschwitz, and so on and so on. Double standard, when Israel is judged by standards in the United Nations, which no other country in the world is judged, it's a clear double standard. And of course, the legitimization, the only country in the world which legitimacy of which is raised again and again and again is Israel. So can't you criticize Israel without double standard, without demonization of Israel, without delegitimization of Israel? And if you cannot, then you are anti-Semite. And so BDS is a typical example. What is boycotting Israel for violation of human rights? Just now, at this moment, what's happening in China with the Uyghurs? You understand that the whole Muslim people is put into the concentration camps, and they use parts of their organs are selling it, not speaking about massive hundreds of thousands rapes and so on. The whole people are put with China. Tibet culture is erased. Are you boycotting China? Are you really boycotting China? No, to the contrary, look at every country of yours in Europe. How many times your trade with China became bigger only in the last years? And how it can be that all these dictatorships in the world, all these dictatorships in the Middle East, you're not boycotting any of them. And the only democratic country you're boycotting, what means you're judging this country by standards which are not judging any other country in the world. Of course, it is clear double standard and legitimization and so on. So if people are really interested in serious dialogue, they will not simply say, oh, that's apartheid state. I was asking many politicians who are using this, who are saying it. Well, on the campus, when we write about it in the book, when they're coming with the slogans, Israel is an apartheid state, and they come to them and say, you know, you're too young to know what is apartheid. But I am a friend of Nelson Mandela. I was an international observer in the elections there. I spent a lot of time in Soweto, the most awful ghetto in South Africa. Do you want me to tell you a little bit about it and then let's compare? No, we are not in this to talk. But politicians cannot not to talk. So you're asking politicians how it can be that you accuse Israel in being apartheid state. And they show you the picture of the wall. Can you find one? I was in the government when we were voting for this wall. And I remember what was the choice. The choice was whether the civil population will suffer from the terrorists who are hiding there, or whether this wall will help us to separate terrorists from those who are not coming with explosives and go really. What it has to do with the racial discrimination. So again, our only weapon is logics. And if they cannot criticize Israel without demonizing Israel, or without using clear double standards of Israel, then yes, they are anti-Semites, whether they like it or not.
And look at the suspicious pattern. In the last year, COVID breaks out all over the place, and I hope everybody is healthy and safe. And all of a sudden, we see a meme, COVID, not COVID-19, but COVID-48. Israel's behind it. Israel's profiting. Israel's exploiting. In May in the United States, there's that awful murder by a police of George Floyd. And all of a sudden, what do we hear? That Israel, the IDF, has been training American police in brutality and racism, as if Americans, I'm sorry to say, as an American, needed training from Israelis in police brutality and racism. Most recently, Israel has tremendous success with vaccinating Israelis, be they Israeli Arabs or Israeli Jews. By the way, the nurse who vaccinated me was a male Israeli Arab nurse. We just called him a nurse. And all of a sudden we're told, oh no, Israel's only giving vaccinations to the Jews. How is it that Israel is always behind the key international headline of the moment? And how is it that Zionism is responsible for every single one of the major crimes of the West? Racism, colonialism, imperialism. It beggars the imagination. It defies logic, unless you are putting Israel and Zionism in the place where you always put the Jew for thousands of years in Europe and in, I'm sorry to say, the Muslim Middle East, at the center of every problem, at the center of every conspiracy, as the central headache of the world. And when that happens, one has to call it out. And that doesn't mean, as Natan was saying, that we don't have a rich vocabulary for criticizing Israel. In fact, one of the arguments we make is that the 3Ds create quite a large space to criticize Israel. And we say to our friends on the left, are you really telling me that you cannot make an argument for your case, for the Palestinians, on all kinds of other issues, without engaging in demonization, without delegitimizing Israel, without holding Israel to double standards? Don't you have other arguments? Why is it that you need to justify disagreeing with Israel by saying it doesn't have any right to exist? Why do we escalate so quickly from saying, I dislike this prime minister or this policy or the occupation, I'm not even afraid of that word, to therefore saying that this one country has lost its right to exist? Doesn't pass the anti-Semitic smell test.
Okay, thank you so much. So I think we'll take a final question and we'll close. Yeah, a question about Russian Jewry today, because I was in Russia last year for a wedding, and Russian Jewry is flourishing and massive. Everybody talks about the revival of Russian Jewry. So maybe if you could share your thoughts about the miracle of the revival of Russian Jewry today, especially Chabad is, of course, at the forefront of the revival. And at the same time, the limitation to certain freedoms, like somebody has posted a question about Navalny and so on. Obviously, this is not the forum, but maybe you'd like to share some thoughts on that.
Well, look, I met a number of time President Putin in the first years of his presidency. In fact, I met him first time when he was the head of FSB, something which became after KGB. I was a minister in the Israeli government, and he was the head of FSB, and then he was the president. And we met a number of times on his initiative, because he wanted to show that now Russia is very different. And he told me, by the way, about Chabad, he just appointed, he appointed as the chief rabbi then Rav Ber Lazar. And he said, I know that among you Jews, not everybody agrees that Chabad is a real Judaism. That's what he said. But for me, Chabad, that is the real Judaism. So I am very glad that the representative of Chabad is now the chief rabbi. Since then, of course, there are shluchim, Chabad shluchim, probably in 70 or 80 big cities, not only big and small cities, and that these are the best shluchim that we have. But it was interesting, he told me then that he believes that that is the big mistake, he believes, of the Soviet leaders. They thought that independent Jewish life is dangerous for the country. that he is very sympathetic to this independent Jewish life. He thinks that it can be a good bridge between Russia and the West. And that was the beginning of his leadership. I have to say, of course, I had as a minister many other conversations with him about Iran, Syria, and so on. And I have to say, almost everything what he was saying then was a lie about Russia not supporting Iran and about Russia's position on many things. What he told me about his attitude to Jewish community was absolutely true. And until this day, we don't meet with him. I don't meet with him anymore because it will be like betrayal of all my democratic dissident friends, because he really retreated a lot from many democratic principles that the court is not independent, corruption is awful, independent journalists are killed or poisoned, and Navalny is the last case of very heroic figure fighting against Putin. But so for democracy, he's bad. It so happens that for the first time in maybe in 1,000 years of history of Russia, the leader of Russia is very positive to Jews. It's not only he's not anti-Semite, he feels very good about Jews. He has his own stories, how he grew together with Jewish family, but you know, every anti-Semite has his stories. He really showed again and again that he is very sympathetic to the Jewish life in Russia. I can say as a head of Jewish agency, we had, whenever we had problems, local Jewish community had problems somewhere in Siberia, we were asking Moscow to help and they were always helping. So it is a little bit paradox that as a Jewish activist, I can say that Putin is very good. As a democratic activist, I can say that Putin is very, very bad for democracy in Russia. Now, as the Jewish community, yes, Jews today can first of all, can have access to Jewish culture and can build their communities. Chabad, Shluchim are playing a very important role in this. Having said all this, don't forget that half of all those who were making Aliyah to Israel before Corona, from when I was the head of Jewish agency, it reached 35,000 a year. Half of them are from Russia. So Aliyah from Russia and from Ukraine is only growing. I don't think that in terms of being able to be part of Jewish community, to celebrate Pesach or Purim and Hanukkah, of course, they have opportunities which we could never dream about. But in terms of feeling themselves secure about the future of Russia and Jews, no, they don't feel secure. Both. And I would say even those parts of Russian Jewry who are not thinking about Aliyah, like rich, successful businessmen, they start making Aliyah in the last years because suddenly they find out that it's not really, for international businessmen, it's not good to be from Russia. They're not afraid of Iron Curtain as the one which was the Soviet Union, but they definitely are afraid that Russia is becoming disconnected from the outer world in business and culture and in many ways. So I think Aliyah from Russia will continue. At the same time, Jewish life, at this moment, Jewish life in Russia is not in danger. And you can accuse the Russian government in many things, but not in anti-Semitism.
The weather's better in Jerusalem.
Yeah, well, in any way, Jerusalem is by far most secure place and good and comfortable place for Jews to live.
Okay, thank you so much. That was fascinating. And of course, I was in Zhukovka last year. The most amazing synagogues are being built. So it is a fascinating story from beginning to end. So we'd like to close and thank our speakers.
Well, you know what? I think it would be unfair if I will not say some word about Chabad Shlichim. I can tell you that when I was already minister in Israeli government, some groups of non-Orthodox Jews, let's say, came to me and said that they have a very serious complaint to me and to Yuli Edelstein, the other minister who came together with me, the politics. I said, what are complaints? Why did you give Russia to Chabad? He said, what do you mean give Russia? look, there are so many shlichim all over. Why from our movement there is no shlichim in Russia? I said, no, first of all, I'm not responsible, not for Chabad, not for Russia, and not me, not your leadership. But I can tell you, if you'll find me the person who wants and is ready to go to a young couple together with his wife and baby who was just born, are ready to go to God-forsaken place somewhere in Siberia. And they'll spend their first 5 years, and there will be 30 Jews there. And in 5 years, they'll have 3 children, and they'll have 90 Jews. And in 10 years, they'll have 70 or 80 children, and there'll be 150 Jews. And they'll be spend their 20 and 30 years of the. They say, stop, we don't have such people. I said, so I can promise you, if you'll find such person, I'll make sure that he or she will go to Shlichut in Russia, though it's not dependent on me. But yes, I have to say that Chabad as Shlichim, which no Jewish organization have, who are really going to these places, spend their life, this language becomes their language, this town becomes the town of them and their children, and at the same time, Jewish community is growing all the time. So, kol hakavod to Chabad.
Thank you so much. So you're really a story of the hero of the Jewish people, and David against Goliath, I think, epitomizes and defines who you are. Nothing's beyond your ability to conquer, and that's an inspiration to the Jewish people today, young people at university and around the world, around Europe. And with this, I'd like to ask Rabbi Lowenthal from Copenhagen to close tonight's evening.
Okay, we say thank you. Thank you very, very much. I would just say that Natan, your book, your memoir, I have read, I will say many times. There are certain little parts in it that I really enjoy reading, both the connection that you have with your wife from afar in the jail cell. It's really something very special. And also the moments that you are informed that you're freed and the way you take out the Tehillim, it's really a very special thing. I think I've probably read that part of your book 10 or 15 times. So your words have been very inspiring for all of us, and I want to thank you very much. And thank everybody that's joined from the various places. I'm just going to name them again, which is around Scandinavia: Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Iceland, Holland, Oxford, and Dublin. I don't know if I've missed anybody. And then, of course, we have from Jerusalem. And I know it's late at night in Jerusalem. So we thank you very much for joining. We've had other lectures. Next week, we're going to have another lecture on Monday evening at 7 o'clock European Central Time with Tova Mordechai, which is a story of her going from a Christian minister to Judaism. So with that, we thank everybody. And
thank you.
And I would also
a lot of health and Lashana Rabba Yerushalayim.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. And with that, we conclude.